The Hells Angels biker found the little girl holding a rusted dog tag, and the story behind it broke his steady voice. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was the dead of night, and the rain was coming down in sheets. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional flash of headlights cutting through the storm. The hum of the motorcycle was the only sound cutting through the thunder. Jake Reaper Morrison, a Hells Angels biker with years of hard riding behind him, was out for a late-night ride. He was used to the loneliness of the road, the wind in his face, and the freedom that came with the rumble of his Harley beneath him. But tonight was different. The night felt heavier. As he neared an abandoned alleyway, something caught his ear, a faint cry, barely audible over the storm. He slowed down, instinctively glancing around. There it was again, a weak voice, desperately calling for help. It wasn't the kind of thing you ignore, not for someone like Jake. He had spent too many years living by the creed of loyalty, and tonight, that creed pulled him towards the alley. Jake's eyes scanned the darkness as he parked his bike, the engine still rumbling beneath him. His boots splashed in the puddles as he walked cautiously towards the source of the sound. That's when he saw her, a little girl, no more than 7 or 8, huddled in the corner, drenched to the bone, clutching something tightly in her hands. She looked up as he approached, her face pale and streaked with dirt and tears. In her hands was a rusted dog tag, a military relic, its edges worn down with age. Hey there. Jake's voice was rough, but gentle. What happened? The girl flinched, her eyes wide with fear. She was trembling, not just from the cold, but from sheer terror. Please don't hurt me, she whispered, clutching the dog tag even tighter. I can't move. I just want to go home. Jake's heart clenched. He had seen his fair share of rough situations, but this was different. He kneeled beside her, his motorcycle gear making him look like a figure straight out of a nightmare. But he moved with surprising tenderness. You're safe now, he assured her softly. I'm not here to hurt you. Let's get you out of here. He reached out, his large, calloused hand offering her warmth and comfort. She hesitated for a moment, but then, as if reading the sincerity in his eyes, she let out a shaky breath and allowed him to help her up. As Jake carefully lifted her, he noticed the dog tag in her hands once again. It was more than just a simple memento. It was a link to a story, a past long buried. And somehow, it seemed like this little girl's story was connected to his own in ways he couldn't yet understand. What's your name? He asked as he carried her to the bike. She blinked at him, unsure. Lily, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Lily, I'm sorry, but I can't go back. I can't go back to where I was. The pain in her voice was unmistakable. There was a deep hurt, a story of betrayal and loss that Jake had heard before. He didn't need to ask more questions, not yet. His instincts, honed over years of protecting those in need, told him there was more to this girl's story than met the eye. With one hand steady on the handlebars and the other holding Lily close, he revved the engine. The rain kept pouring, but for the first time in what felt like years, Jake wasn't just riding to escape. He was riding to protect. Little did he know, this encounter would change everything. About him, about the past he tried to forget, and about the secrets that had been buried for far too long. Jake didn't stop riding until he reached the outskirts of the small town. The streets were quieter here, the storm still howling behind him, but at least it had slowed down. He glanced over at Lily, still clutching the rusted dog tag like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this world. Her small frame trembled in the warmth of his leather jacket, and the look in her eyes, fear mixed with something deeper, something more painful, spoke volumes. They arrived at an old, run-down building on the edge of town. The garage was tucked away behind a rusted gate, the kind of place that didn't get many visitors anymore. Jake's hands were steady on the handlebars as he parked the bike in front of the garage. The rain had soaked through his clothes, but his mind was elsewhere, focused on the girl in front of him. We're safe here, he said softly, helping her off the bike. She nodded but said nothing. He guided her toward the old building, his boots crunching against the gravel as he led her inside. The dim light inside the garage flickered, revealing old tools, bikes, and the remnants of a life Jake had once lived, before the violence, before the years of road calls and broken promises. "You can sit down here," he said, pointing to an old leather chair by the wall. Lily walked over slowly, sitting down with a sigh, the weight of the night pressing down on her. Jake took off his jacket and hung it on a hook by the door. He went over to the old coffee pot on the counter, pouring himself a cup as he tried to process what had just happened. He hadn't been expecting this. He had been expecting a quiet ride, some time to clear his head, but now, this little girl was here, with him, in his sanctuary. Her story wasn't over, he knew that much. She was still carrying something, physically and emotionally, that he needed to understand. He sat down across from her, watching her carefully. "Lily, what happened back there?" She looked down at the dog tag in her hand, her thumb brushing over the worn edges. For a moment, there was silence. Then, her voice came, small but steady. "It was my dad's." Her eyes met his, and there was a pain in them that Jake couldn't ignore. "He went to war, and never came back." The words hit Jake like a punch in the gut. He knew that pain, the loss of a loved one who went away and never returned. But there was something more in her voice, something raw. "Who took you away?" he asked gently. Lily bit her lip, her small fingers tightening around the dog tag. "My mom, she's gone now. Left me with people I didn't know." Her voice cracked. They wanted to use me. I didn't want to go back to them. I couldn't." Jake felt a surge of protectiveness rise in his chest. No child should ever have to go through that. No one should ever have to live with that kind of fear. He leaned forward, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "You're safe now, Lily. You don't have to go back to those people. You can stay here, with me, until we figure things out." Lily looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. She didn't find any. Slowly, she nodded. For the first time since he found her in that alley, Jake felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. But he knew the peace wouldn't last. He had no idea who she was running from, or what those people might do if they came looking for her. But he wasn't going to let her go back. Not on his watch. He stood up, his boots thudding against the concrete floor as he moved toward the back of the garage. There was work to be done, but more than that, there were answers to find. And something in his gut told him that this wasn't just about protecting Lily. This was about something bigger, something buried deep in his past that was starting to resurface. He didn't know why he felt this way, but there was a pull, a connection between him and Lily that he couldn't ignore. He turned back to her, his voice low but firm. "Stay here. I'll be right back." Lily nodded, her eyes tired but trusting. As Jake walked out into the storm once more, his mind raced. The rain had started up again, but this time it didn't matter. Whatever came next, whatever secrets this dog tag held, he was ready. And he wasn't going to let anything, or anyone, hurt Lily. Not now, not ever. Jake stepped outside, the rain now coming down in relentless sheets, as if the storm itself had a point to prove. His boots squelched in the mud as he made his way to his old truck, parked near the garage. The headlights sliced through the darkness, and as Jake opened the truck door, a cold gust of wind hit him, but it didn't bother him. His mind was elsewhere, on Lily and the story she had shared with him. A part of him wanted to believe that she could be just a scared girl running from a bad situation, but another part of him knew that there was more to her story than that. The rusted dog tag she had held so tightly, he couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something more, something deeper. As he pulled away from the garage, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the look in Lily's eyes when she spoke of the people who had taken her in. There was no mistaking it. She had been through hell, and whatever had happened to her, whoever she was running from, wasn't just a typical runaway situation. This was personal. As the truck rumbled down the winding roads, Jake's thoughts turned to the dog tag again. It was a piece of the past, a part of someone's history that had been buried for too long. Maybe it was a symbol of something lost, or maybe it was a key to a door that had been locked for years. He had to find out. The drive took longer than expected, the rain making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. But Jake's focus never wavered. He had to get to the bottom of this, for Lily, for himself. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as his mind raced through possibilities. He had spent years running from his own demons, his own past. Maybe now was the time to face them. Maybe now was the time to fix what had been broken. When Jake finally arrived at the old cabin on the outskirts of town, He didn't waste any time. He grabbed the flashlight from the truck and headed toward the back of the property. The cabin had been abandoned for years, the windows boarded up, and the roof sagging from age and neglect. But Jake knew there was something hidden here. He could feel it. The cabin had once been home to someone important, someone who mattered. The rusted dog tag in Lily's hand was the clue, the missing link to a story that had been left unfinished. As Jake made his way inside, the floorboards creaked under his weight, the air thick with dust and memories. He aimed the flashlight around the room, searching for any sign of what he was looking for. The walls were bare, save for a few old photographs, yellowed and faded with time. But then something caught his eye, a box, tucked away in the corner beneath a pile of old blankets. His heart skipped a beat as he approached it. The box was small, no bigger than a shoe box, but it was old. The wood was weathered, the edges chipped from years of neglect. With a quick motion, Jake opened the box, revealing a collection of letters, old photographs, and a stack of faded military documents. His eyes narrowed as he carefully examined each piece. There was a name written on the top of one of the letters, William Thompson. It was the same last name as the dog tag Lily had been holding. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he read through the letter, piecing together the fragments of a story he hadn't known he was part of. William Thompson had been a soldier, stationed overseas, and had written these letters to his family before he went missing in action. As Jake read on, it became clear Lily's father was the man in these letters. The man who had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a dog tag and a legacy of unanswered questions. Jake stood there in the dim light, the weight of the discovery sinking in. This was bigger than just protecting a girl. This was a puzzle that had been waiting for years to be solved, and now, Jake was holding the final pieces. He carefully placed the letters back in the box and stood up, the realization settling over him like a heavy cloak. The storm outside had let up, but the storm inside him was just beginning. There were people who had been looking for these answers, people who had been searching for Lily's father, and now, they were going to come looking for her. And Jake wasn't about to let them take her. He turned, his resolve hardening as he headed back toward the truck. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Jake knew what he had to do. He wasn't just going to protect Lily. He was going to uncover the truth about her father, about the people who had taken her, and about the secrets that had been buried for too long. And whatever it took, he wasn't going to stop until he had those answers. Jake drove through the quiet streets, the truck's engine humming steadily in the early morning silence. His mind was still racing, the pieces of the puzzle clicking together, but there was something nagging at him. The name William Thompson kept echoing in his head. It felt like a memory he couldn't quite place, a name tied to a past he thought he'd left behind. He shook his head, trying to focus on the present. Lily was counting on him, and whatever else was tied to her father's disappearance, Jake would find the answers. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, casting a gray, somber light over the town. Jake knew the longer he waited, the more likely it was someone would find out Lily was with him, and that someone would be dangerous. He pulled into the small parking lot outside a rundown diner on the edge of town, the only place that seemed to still have some warmth to it. Inside, the smell of coffee and greasy breakfast food filled the air, but Jake wasn't here for food. He scanned the room as he stepped inside, nodding to a few familiar faces. The diner was the kind of place where people talked, whether you wanted them to or not. It had been a while since Jake had been here, but he knew the owner. Rose, a no-nonsense woman who had been around long enough to see everything. He walked up to the counter where Rose was wiping down mugs, her sharp eyes taking in his presence before she said anything. "Jake Morrison, haven't seen you around in a while," she said, her voice gruff but not unkind. "What can I get you?" "Just coffee, Rose," Jake replied, sitting down on the stool. He didn't need much. He was here for information, not breakfast. Rose poured him a cup, sliding it across the counter. "Heard about the little girl, Jake. People are talking," she said, her voice lowered. Jake took a sip, feeling the heat of the coffee seep into his bones. He wasn't surprised Rose had heard. Small towns didn't keep secrets for long. "Yeah, I found her," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "She's safe now." "Safe? That's a tall order," Rose replied, raising an eyebrow. "You know what kind of people you're dealing with." Jake didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure he knew what he was dealing with, but he knew he couldn't let Lily go. I'm not letting anyone hurt her, Jake said, his voice low. You can't just protect her forever, Jake. People are looking for her, Rose warned. And they'll come looking for you, too, if they think you know something. Jake's grip tightened around the coffee mug. He knew Rose was right. Whoever Lily's father had been, he wasn't just some soldier who had gone missing. There were people out there who wanted answers, people who would stop at nothing to get them. He had to act fast, find out what had really happened to Lily's father, and protect the girl from whatever danger was closing in on them. He leaned in, lowering his voice. I need you to help me, Rose. I need to find out who William Thompson really was. Rose's eyes flickered with recognition, then narrowed. You sure you want to open that can of worms, Jake? William Thompson was a good man, but he got caught up in some bad business. Some people never let go of old grudges. Jake's mind raced. William Thompson's name had triggered something in Rose. There was more to this than he realized, and Lily's father was at the center of it. What kind of business? Jake asked, his voice steady. The kind that doesn't go away just because someone's missing, Rose said quietly. She glanced around the diner, making sure no one was listening before continuing. William was tangled up with the wrong people. They didn't just forget about him when he disappeared. Jake sat back, taking in her words. He had known the man who had written those letters. He had known the soldier who had gone missing. But he had no idea just how deep the connections went. And if Lily's father had been involved with dangerous people, then that made Lily a target, too. Where can I find out more? Jake asked. Rose hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of caution and something else. There's a place up in the mountains, she said after a moment. An old cabin that belonged to one of William's old contacts. If you want to find out what happened to him, that's where you'll start. Jake stood up, his mind already turning to the next step. He had no time to waste. The answers were out there, and he wasn't about to let anyone hurt Lily or get in his way. Thanks, Rose, he said, his voice steady. I'll take it from here. Rose nodded, her expression softening just a little. Be careful, Jake. There's more to this than you think. Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew the stakes now, and he wasn't backing down. Lily's future depended on him finding the truth, and he was going to get it, no matter what it took. He left the diner, the weight of what he had just learned settling heavily in his chest. The road ahead was dangerous, but he wasn't afraid. He had a job to do, and this time, he wasn't going to stop until it was done. Jake's truck bounced along the rough, winding road leading up into the mountains. The air had turned colder as he ascended, the thick forest surrounding him giving way to a more desolate landscape. The trees here were older, more twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands trying to grasp at the sky. It was the kind of place that felt forgotten by time, a place where secrets could hide for generations. He hadn't spoken to Lily much since they'd left the diner. She had been quiet, her eyes distant, still clutching the rusted dog tag in her hand. Jake could tell that the journey was weighing on her, but there was nothing he could do except keep moving forward. He needed answers, and they were up here, somewhere in this desolate mountain range. As he turned a sharp bend in the road, the headlights of his truck illuminated a small cabin nestled against the side of the hill. The building was old, its wood weathered by years of neglect, but there was something about it that felt like it still held the echoes of the past. Jake's pulse quickened. This was it. This was where he would find the truth. He parked the truck a little ways from the cabin, not wanting to attract attention, and grabbed the flashlight from the dashboard. He turned to Lily, who had been staring out the window, her face pale in the dim light. Stay close, he said softly, his voice steady. We're here to find some answers. Just keep quiet, and we'll get through this. She nodded, though Jake could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. They stepped out into the cold night air, the wind biting at their skin. Jake led Lily toward the cabin, his boots crunching against the gravel path as they approached the front door. It was dark inside, but the faintest light filtered through the cracks in the wood. The place felt abandoned, but there was a lingering presence, like someone had been here recently. As Jake reached for the door, it creaked open before he could touch it. His hand froze, and he instinctively pulled Lily closer. Who's there? Jake called out, his voice low and authoritative. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a figure stepped into the doorway, half hidden in the shadows. Jake's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. He didn't recognize the man, but he could feel the tension in the air. The man was tall, his face obscured by a hood, but there was something about him that Jake didn't trust. You're looking for something, the man said, his voice gravelly. Jake kept his hand close to the gun at his side, but he didn't make any sudden moves. Who are you? Jake asked, his tone cold. Does it matter? The man stepped forward, just enough for Jake to see his face. He was older than Jake had expected, his eyes sharp and calculating. I know what you're looking for, and I know what you're trying to protect, the man said. Jake's jaw tightened. What do you know about William Thompson? The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at Lily, who was standing behind Jake, her eyes wide with fear. It's not just about him, is it? The man said, his gaze shifting back to Jake. It's about what he left behind. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The man's words felt like they were meant to cut through the heart of the mystery. What do you mean? Jake asked, his voice low, demanding an answer. The man smiled slightly, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile you'd give someone before you dropped a bombshell on them. You think you're the only one searching for answers? You think you're the only one who knows about the deals, the power, the people William was tangled up with? The man's words hit Jake like a punch in the gut. He hadn't known the full extent of William's past, but he'd known enough to understand that there were dangerous people involved. And now, Jake was deep in it. You don't know the half of it, Jake said, his voice cold. And if you're here to get in my way, I'll make sure you regret it. The man raised his hands, as if in surrender. I'm not here to stop you, he said. I'm here to help you. But you need to understand, there's more to this than just a missing person. There's a reason Lily's here. And if you don't figure that out, you'll both be dead before the truth comes out. Jake stood there, the weight of the man's words sinking in. He had been so focused on protecting Lily, on finding the truth about her father, that he hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. The man was right. This wasn't just about a missing soldier. This was about something far darker, something that went deeper than Jake had ever imagined. He looked back at Lily, her face pale and her hands shaking, clutching the dog tag even tighter. This was no longer just about finding her father. It was about protecting her, about keeping her alive long enough to unravel the truth. Jake took a deep breath, his mind made up. Fine, he said, his voice hardening. Help us. But if you're lying to me, the man nodded, cutting him off. You'll get your answers. But be careful who you trust. This isn't just about you and her anymore. There are others watching, and they won't stop until they get what they want. Jake felt the weight of the man's warning settle over him. He didn't trust him, not yet, but he didn't have much of a choice. With a final glance at Lily, Jake stepped into the cabin, ready to find out what this mystery had in store for him. Whatever it was, he wasn't going to back down now. Not when Lily's life and the truth were on the line. Jake stepped into the cabin, the air musty and thick with dust. The room was dim, lit only by the weak light filtering through cracks in the walls. The man, who had introduced himself as someone who knew more than he was letting on, stood by the door, his eyes narrowed, watching every move Jake made. Lily was close behind him, her small form almost lost in the shadows. Jake could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The man had claimed he wanted to help, but something about his calm demeanor didn't sit right with Jake. Sit down, the man said, his voice gravelly. He gestured toward a table in the center of the room. It was a simple wooden table, scarred by years of use, much like the cabin itself. Jake didn't move immediately, instead studying the man closely. He had the look of someone who had been through things, rough, dangerous things. Who are you, really? Jake asked, his voice steady, betraying none of the tension he felt inside. The man smirked, a bitter twist of his lips. I told you already, I'm here to help. My name's Paul. William Thompson was someone I used to know. A long time ago, we were in the same line of work. But things went sideways, as they often do. He paused, letting the words sink in. Jake's eyes didn't leave Paul's face. He was still trying to figure out how this man was connected to everything, why he knew so much. What line of work? Jake pressed, his voice sharper now. Paul shrugged, a movement that seemed careless, but his eyes were sharp, focused. The kind of work that doesn't leave room for mistakes. You're looking for answers about William, but what you don't know is that the people who want him dead aren't just after him. They're after anyone connected to him, including you. The room felt colder. Jake clenched his jaw. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but hearing it out loud made it all too real. I'm not afraid of anyone, Jake said, though his words were more to reassure himself than anything else. Paul raised an eyebrow. You should be. He moved toward the table, his boots scraping on the old wood. You don't know who you're dealing with. They're not just going to go away because you're tough. This is bigger than you and your little girl. Jake felt a pang in his chest at the mention of Lily. She's not just a little girl. She's a victim, and I'm going to make sure no one hurts her, he said, his voice firm. Paul's expression softened slightly, but the edge in his eyes remained. I get it. You want to protect her, but you need to know the full story before you get yourself in deeper. He gestured to the stack of papers on the table. Those documents, they tell the story. William Thompson's story. But it's not just about what happened to him. It's about what he left behind. And that's what you need to understand. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself and that girl in a world of trouble. Jake hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and grabbing the first document. It was an old photograph, yellowed with age. It showed a man, William Thompson, no doubt, and a group of others standing in front of a building, their faces hard, expressions unreadable. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He recognized one of the men in the photo. It was the same man who had been looking for Lily and had almost found her a few days ago. This is what you're up against, Paul said, as if reading Jake's thoughts. They're not just some street gang. These people have connections, resources. They're dangerous. Jake's grip on the photo tightened. He had known the stakes were high, but seeing it laid out so clearly made the danger all too real. What do they want with her? Jake asked, his voice low. Paul didn't answer right away. He seemed to weigh his words carefully before speaking. They think she knows something. Something that can destroy them. And they'll stop at nothing to get it. Jake's blood ran cold. He had known there was more to Lily's story than she was letting on, but hearing it from Paul confirmed his worst fears. So what do I do? Jake asked, his voice tight with urgency. You have to get to the heart of it. Paul replied, moving around the table to stand beside Jake. You need to find out what she knows. What her father knew. The truth is buried in that dog tag she's been holding on to. Once you have that, you'll have leverage. And that's the only way you'll survive this. Jake glanced at Lily, who was sitting quietly, her small hands clutching the dog tag, as if it were the only thing that could anchor her to this world. He felt a deep sense of responsibility for her, more than he had for anyone in a long time. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was his responsibility now. I won't let them hurt her, Jake said, his voice low but filled with determination. Paul's eyes locked with his. You may not have a choice, he said, his voice tinged with something dark. But you can't do it alone. Jake nodded. He knew the truth now. This was no longer just about protecting a little girl from some bad people. This was about survival. And the fight was only just beginning. Jake didn't sleep that night. The weight of what Paul had said kept gnawing at him, pulling him deeper into a world he thought he had left behind years ago. As the hours passed, he stared at the stack of papers on the table, each one a piece of a puzzle he wasn't sure he was ready to solve. Lily had fallen asleep on the old couch, the dog tag still tightly clutched in her hand, her face peaceful despite the storm raging around them. Jake had told her they were safe, but a part of him knew the truth. There was no safety here, not anymore. The people Paul had warned him about were out there, and they would come for her. They would come for him. He couldn't stop it, not on his own. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the cabin, Jake decided it was time to take action. He grabbed his jacket and pulled on his boots, the cold air outside biting at his skin as he stepped into the early morning quiet. He couldn't waste any more time. He needed to find the answers before the people looking for Lily found her first. The cabin was silent as he walked past Lily, still sleeping soundly, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Jake's mind was set. He had no choice but to trust Paul, for now. The man had given him enough information to know that William Thompson's disappearance wasn't just a random event. There were people who had a vested interest in keeping the truth buried. People who would go to any lengths to protect their secrets. Jake couldn't let that happen. He wasn't sure how he was going to get to the bottom of this, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt Lily. He grabbed the key to the old truck and headed out the door, the engine roaring to life as he drove down the mountain road. He had a plan, but he needed more information, something to tie it all together. He needed to find someone who could help him dig deeper into William Thompson's past, someone who knew more about the dangerous people Paul had mentioned. As he made his way through the winding roads, Jake's thoughts turned to Lily. He kept thinking about the way she had clutched the dog tag, her small hand wrapped tightly around it, like it was the only thing that kept her grounded. What did it mean? Why was it so important? And why had her father left it behind? Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was the key to everything. If he could just figure out what the dog tag meant, maybe he could understand why Lily was being targeted. His eyes scanned the road ahead, but his mind was a million miles away, racing through possibilities. The truck bounced along the uneven road, the wheels kicking up gravel as Jake drove faster, his sense of urgency growing with each passing minute. He wasn't sure who he was looking for, but he knew he had to find someone who had answers. Someone who knew the story behind William Thompson. Someone who could shed light on the darkness that was closing in around them. After what felt like hours, Jake finally pulled into the small, run-down town at the base of the mountain. It wasn't much, just a few buildings scattered around a dusty main street, but it was a place he knew well. He had been here before, back in his days with the club. There were people here who could help him. He just had to know where to look. Jake parked the truck and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel as he made his way toward the small bar at the end of the street. He had a few old contacts here, people who owed him favors, people who knew things. He wasn't sure who would be willing to talk, but he had to try. The bar was dimly lit, the smell of stale beer and smoke hanging in the air. Jake's eyes adjusted to the low light as he scanned the room. A few patrons were nursing their drinks at the bar, their faces hardened by years of hard living. Jake spotted a familiar face in the corner, a man named Roy who had been a part of his past. Roy was rough around the edges, a man who had seen more than his fair share of trouble. But he had connections. And right now, Jake needed those connections more than anything. He made his way toward Roy, who looked up from his drink as Jake approached. "You're back," Roy said, his voice low, eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Jake?" Jake leaned against the bar, his gaze steady. "I need information," he said simply. "About William Thompson." Roy's eyes flickered with recognition. "Thompson, huh?" he muttered, taking a long swig of his drink. "That name's trouble. You don't want to go digging into that." Jake's jaw tightened. "I don't have a choice. I need to know what happened to him." Roy set his glass down and studied Jake for a long moment. "You don't know what you're asking," Roy said finally, his voice low. "Thompson didn't just disappear. He was taken down by the people he was mixed up with. Dangerous people. People who don't like loose ends." Jake didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of them." Roy chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "You should be. They don't forget. And they don't let go." Jake didn't back down. "Then tell me what I need to know." Roy hesitated, then leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thompson was mixed up with the wrong crowd. They're still looking for anything they can get their hands on, especially the people connected to him. You're playing a dangerous game, Jake. But if you really want to go down this road, there's a place. A warehouse. They store everything there. It's all in the files." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had the location. Now he just had to get in. And he had to do it before anyone else did. Before the people who had been hunting Lily found her. "Where is it?" Jake asked, his voice steady, determined. Roy gave him a nod, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "I'll give you the address. But remember, you're on your own with this one." Jake didn't need to hear more. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't backing down now. Not when Lily's future and the truth were on the line. Jake followed Roy's directions to the warehouse, the truck's tires crunching on the gravel as he pulled into the secluded lot. The building loomed in the darkness, its windows dark and empty, the rusted steel door hanging slightly ajar. The air around it was heavy with a sense of abandonment, as though the place had been forgotten by time. But Jake knew better. This was no forgotten building. It was the center of something dangerous, something that had been hidden from the world for far too long. He could feel the weight of it pressing in on him, the tension crawling under his skin like 1,000 invisible eyes watching his every move. He killed the engine and sat in the truck for a moment, letting the quiet settle in. Lily had stayed behind at the cabin. She was safer there, at least for now. Jake had told her he would return soon, but the fear in her eyes when he left made his stomach tighten. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep her safe, and he didn't know how deep this would go, but whatever happened, he was in it now. He stepped out of the truck, his boots heavy on the ground as he approached the warehouse. The door creaked in the wind, barely hanging on its hinges. Jake didn't hesitate. He pushed it open, the sound echoing in the vast emptiness inside. His flashlight cut through the dark, revealing a maze of old crates and discarded equipment. The air inside was musty, thick with the smell of mildew and old machinery. Jake's heart raced as he stepped further in, the weight of what he was about to do pressing heavily on him. This wasn't just about finding out what had happened to Lily's father. This was about exposing a hidden network of dangerous people, and Jake was about to walk right into the lion's den. He moved carefully, his eyes scanning the room as he made his way deeper into the warehouse. Every step felt like it echoed, every creak of the floorboard sounding like a warning. The deeper he went, the more he could feel the tension in the air, the weight of secrets buried beneath years of neglect. As Jake approached a corner of the warehouse, he froze. A faint sound, like a muffled voice, reached his ears. It was soft at first, barely audible over the sound of his own breathing. But then it grew louder, a low murmur that was impossible to ignore. He crept closer, his flashlight flickering in his hand as he tried to make sense of the noise. And then he saw it. A door, hidden behind a stack of old crates, partially open. He couldn't see what was beyond it, but the voices were clearer now. Two people talking, their words indistinguishable, but the tone heavy with intent. Jake didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, stepping around the crates to reach the door. As he peered through the gap, his pulse quickened. Two figures stood in the shadows, their backs to him, oblivious to his presence. Jake's hand instinctively reached for the gun tucked into his waistband, but he held back. He needed answers, not bloodshed. He strained his ears to catch what they were saying, hoping to hear something that would give him the edge he needed. "You sure she knows?" one of the figures asked, the voice low and cautious. "I'm telling you, she doesn't know anything," the other replied. "But her father did, and if we find out what he knew, we can use it. We can control everything." Jake's grip tightened on the doorframe, his breath coming in shallow gasps. This was it. This was the reason they were after Lily. It wasn't just about her father being missing. It was about what he had known, the dangerous secrets he had uncovered. And now those secrets were worth more than anything to the people in this room. Jake wasn't sure who they were, but he knew they were not the kind of people you crossed. They were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to protect what they had. Jake's mind raced. He had to act. He wasn't going to let them use Lily or her father's secrets for their own gain. He had to shut them down. As he stepped back from the door, he carefully positioned himself in the shadows, his breathing steady. He had to get closer. He needed to see their faces, know who they were. Slowly, he moved, making his way around the warehouse, staying low and out of sight. The voices continued, but they were harder to hear now. The closer Jake got, the more his heart pounded. The stakes were higher than ever. He couldn't let them get away. He had come too far, and Lily was depending on him. He had no choice but to push forward. When Jake finally reached the other side of the room, he spotted a set of stairs leading up to a loft area. He took a deep breath and moved silently, the creak of the stairs barely audible under his weight. He reached the top, crouching low as he peered into the small office above. And there they were, the two figures he had heard before. Their conversation was still going, but now Jake could see their faces. One of them was an older man, his face weathered and hardened by years of crime. The other was younger, his eyes sharp and calculating. He wasn't sure who they were yet, but they were the ones pulling the strings. They were the ones who had to be stopped. Jake didn't hesitate. He stepped out of the shadows, gun in hand, his voice steady but commanding. "Drop it," he said, his words cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. The two men froze, their eyes locking onto him. Jake's heart raced as he took a step forward, his grip firm on the gun. The game had changed. He was no longer just protecting Lily. He was about to take down the people who had been pulling the strings behind everything. The truth was finally within his grasp, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Jake's voice echoed in the empty loft as he stood with the gun pointed at the two men. The older man's face twisted in anger, but there was a hint of something else in his eyes, fear, maybe, or surprise. The younger one was quicker to react, his hand darting toward the gun at his hip. Jake's finger twitched on the trigger, but he didn't fire. "Not yet. Don't make me ask twice," Jake growled, his eyes fixed on the younger man. "Move slow, and you won't get hurt." The older man raised his hands, his voice low and gruff. "You don't know what you're getting into, boy." Jake didn't flinch. He'd heard it all before. Threats, intimidation, men thinking they could scare him off. But Jake wasn't backing down this time. Not when Lily's safety was on the line. "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Jake said, his tone sharp, unwavering. "Now tell me what I want to know." The younger man froze. his hand still hovering near his holster. The older man spoke again, his voice reluctant. "William Thompson, you're really asking about him?" Jake nodded. He was involved. With a lot more than just the army, wasn't he? The older man sighed heavily, looking at the younger man, who was still eyeing Jake nervously. Yeah, he was. William wasn't just a soldier. He was part of something bigger, something a lot of people don't like to talk about. Jake leaned in, his eyes narrowing. Who were these people? What's the connection to Lily? The older man hesitated, then nodded toward the younger one. We're not the ones you should be asking about. There's someone else involved, someone far more dangerous. The younger man looked like he wanted to argue, but the older man gave him a warning glance. You're digging in the wrong place. The older man continued, his voice grim. You think you're protecting that little girl? You're just making yourself a target. They'll come for you, and when they do, you'll wish you hadn't gone down this road. Jake's grip on the gun tightened. He wasn't interested in threats. He needed answers, and he needed them now. I don't care about their threats, Jake said, his voice low. I care about the truth. And the truth is, you know something you're not telling me. The man shifted uncomfortably. Look, I don't want any trouble. But if you really want to know what happened to William, you're going to have to talk to someone who can give you the full story. I'm not that guy. Jake studied him for a moment. He could sense the fear in the man's voice. But there was something else, something deeper, like there was more going on than he was willing to admit. Who do I need to talk to? Jake asked, his voice steady, demanding. The older man leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. There's a place. A safe house. It's not far from here, but you'll need to be careful. Whoever you talk to there, they know everything. But they don't take kindly to strangers. And if you go there, you're stepping into their world. One you won't be able to get out of. Jake didn't hesitate. Where is it? The older man hesitated for a moment longer, then spoke, giving Jake an address. It was a warehouse, similar to the one they were in now, but more secure. You'll find answers there, the man said. But be ready. You're dealing with people who don't care about right or wrong. They care about power, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep it. Jake stood still for a moment, taking in the information. He wasn't sure if this was the right lead, but it was all he had. He couldn't waste any more time. Thanks, Jake muttered, his eyes hard. But I'm not done yet. The older man raised his hands in mock surrender, as if he had given up. You think you can just walk away from this? You really don't know what you're dealing with, do you? Jake ignored the man's words and turned to leave. He didn't need to hear any more. He had the address. That was enough for now. As Jake made his way down the stairs and out of the warehouse, he felt a cold determination settle over him. The pieces were coming together, but the picture was far from clear. He didn't know who was pulling the strings, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to stop until he found out. The road ahead was going to get a lot more dangerous. But Jake didn't care. He had made a promise to Lily, and he wasn't going to break it. Not now. Not ever. He hopped into his truck and fired up the engine, his thoughts already racing ahead to the next move. The warehouse was the key, but there was more to this than just one mystery. There was something bigger, something connected to William Thompson's past, and Jake wasn't going to rest until he uncovered the truth. As the truck sped down the road, the weight of what was coming next settled in. Whoever these people were, they wouldn't go down easily. But neither would Jake. He wasn't just doing this for Lily anymore. He was doing it for himself, too. And nothing was going to stop him from finding the answers. Jake's truck roared down the darkened road, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The address the older man had given him had led him to a small, isolated building on the outskirts of town. The kind of place you drive by without noticing, if you didn't know what you were looking for. The warehouse loomed ahead, its silhouette barely visible in the night, its windows dark and the only sound the distant hum of the wind. He pulled into the gravel lot, parking far from the entrance, his eyes scanning the area. There were no lights, no signs of life. But Jake wasn't here for the obvious. He was here to find answers. He knew what was at stake now, and there was no turning back. As he stepped out of the truck, the cold night air hit him like a slap in the face. He moved toward the building with deliberate steps, his senses sharp, his mind racing. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. This was about everything. About the people who were hunting her, about the man who had vanished, about the dangerous people tied to William Thompson's past. The doors of the warehouse creaked as he pushed them open, the hinges protesting as they moved. Inside was pitch dark. Jake clicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows, revealing a vast space filled with old crates, machinery, and stacks of forgotten goods. The smell of dust and metal filled his lungs as he moved deeper into the room. Every footstep echoed in the silence, and Jake's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of life, any clue that could lead him to the truth. His pulse quickened as he passed a series of office doors, their windows clouded with grime. He stopped, his heart skipping a beat as he noticed something out of place, a faint light seeping through a crack beneath one of the doors. His instincts kicked in. Jake approached cautiously, his hand resting on the door handle. He could hear murmurs coming from the other side. Low voices, just enough to make out a few words. "She's got to be here," one voice said. Jake froze, his breath caught in his throat. They were talking about Lily. He could feel the tension building in his chest as he carefully turned the handle and pushed the door open. Inside, two men sat at a desk, papers scattered across the surface, their backs to the door. Jake stepped in, his presence making them pause. One of the men turned slowly, his eyes narrowing when he saw Jake standing there. The other man remained motionless, his face hidden in the shadows. "What are you doing here?" the first man growled, his hand hovering near the gun on his hip. Jake didn't flinch. He had seen enough of this kind of scene to know how it played out. "I could ask you the same thing," Jake said, his voice calm, even as his heart raced. "But I think we both know why I'm here." The man sneered, his grip tightening on the gun. "You have no idea what you're getting into." "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Jake replied, his voice steady, unwavering. "Now, you're going to tell me where she is. Where Lily is." The man's eyes flickered to the shadows, as if seeking the approval of his companion. The second man shifted slightly, just enough to show a glimpse of his face. A face Jake recognized. It was one of the men from the photo, one of the men involved with William Thompson. "You really think you're in charge here?" the man said, his voice a low, amused drawl. "You're just a man looking for answers, but the people you're up against, they've already made their move." Jake took a step forward, his jaw tight. "I don't care who they are. You've been hiding behind your walls long enough. I'm not leaving without her." The man didn't respond immediately. For a moment, the two just stared at each other, the tension thick in the air. Then the man spoke, his voice tinged with something like resignation. "You don't get it. She's part of something bigger than you can understand. The people she's connected to. They're not going to stop just because you play the hero." Jake's hand tightened on his gun. He wasn't here for lectures. He wasn't here to listen to more empty threats. "Where is she?" he asked again, his voice cold hard. The man finally broke eye contact, glancing over at the papers on the desk. "You really want to know? Fine. But you're not going to like it." He grabbed a folder from the pile of papers and tossed it toward Jake. The folder landed on the desk with a dull thud, its contents spilling out. Inside were maps, documents, and a photograph, one that Jake recognized immediately. It was Lily, her face barely visible, but it was unmistakably her. "You'll find her where it all began," the man said. "In the place your friend William tried to bury. But be warned, there's no going back once you walk through that door." Jake's eyes flicked back to the photograph, his mind spinning. This was it. This was the answer he had been searching for. He grabbed the folder, his pulse racing as he scanned the documents. The address on the map matched the one from earlier, the warehouse. But this was different. It wasn't just the warehouse now. It was the key. Lily's father had hidden something here. Something they couldn't afford to find. Jake's mind worked quickly, piecing together the clues. There were people after him now, after Lily, after everything that had been hidden. But no matter what came next, he wasn't backing down. Not when the truth was within reach. He turned toward the door, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. He wasn't going to stop. Not until he had Lily safe and the answers he needed to destroy everything they'd built. He wasn't just walking into the fire. He was about to set it ablaze. Jake's truck kicked up gravel as he sped through the darkened streets, the address burning in his mind. He had everything he needed now, documents, maps, and a photograph that could lead him to Lily. The tension in his chest only grew heavier as he approached the abandoned industrial area marked on the map. The building was just as it had been described. Isolated, unassuming, the kind of place no one would think twice about. But Jake wasn't fooled. He knew better than to trust appearances. This was it, the place where everything started. As he slowed the truck, his thoughts flashed to Lily. Her face, filled with fear and confusion, had haunted him ever since he'd promised to protect her. He hadn't been able to keep her safe from the dangers lurking in the shadows, but now, he was about to change that. This place, this warehouse, held the answers he needed. He parked the truck a few hundred feet from the entrance, the looming structure casting a long shadow in the night. The road was deserted, no sign of life, no noise but the rustling of the wind. Jake stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. His hand instinctively went to the gun at his side, but he kept it holstered. He didn't need to start a fight. Not yet. As he walked toward the building, the cold air bit at his skin, but he didn't feel it. His focus was unshakable. Every step took him closer to the truth. Inside the warehouse, the silence was deafening. The metal walls groaned as the wind pressed against them, but there was no sound of movement, no sign of life. The beam from his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing rows of old crates and discarded machinery. Jake moved quickly, his eyes scanning every corner of the vast room. He wasn't just looking for answers. He was looking for Lily. The faint smell of old wood and metal filled the air as he moved deeper into the building. His heart was racing now, each step heavier than the last. Somewhere in here, hidden among the forgotten remnants of this place, were the secrets that could destroy everything he'd worked for. As he approached the back of the warehouse, Jake spotted something strange, a door, slightly ajar. His pulse quickened as he approached, the faintest hint of a light spilling out from the crack. Without hesitation, he pushed the door open, his hand steady on the handle. The sight before him took his breath away. The room was filled with documents, maps, and old photos, all carefully arranged on a long wooden table. At the far end of the room stood a figure, his back to Jake, hunched over a set of files. The man was tall, wearing a dark coat that blended into the shadows. Jake didn't move at first, trying to assess the situation. The man hadn't heard him yet. The air in the room was thick with the weight of everything hidden here, everything that had been kept from the world. Slowly, Jake stepped forward, his boots silent on the concrete floor. "You're looking for something," the man said, his voice low, but not surprised. Jake didn't speak. He didn't need to. He knew who this man was. The photograph, the documents, everything pointed to him. He had the answers, the ones Jake needed to save Lily. The man turned slowly, meeting Jake's gaze with calm eyes. "You're a long way from home, Jake," he said, his tone almost casual. "I know what you're after." Jake's grip tightened on the flashlight, but he kept his cool. "Where is she?" he demanded. The man smirked. "You've come all this way for a girl, huh?" He stepped forward, the tension rising. "She doesn't mean anything to you, not really. You think you're her protector, but you have no idea what's going on here." Jake didn't let the man's words shake him. "Where is she?" he repeated. The man sighed and motioned toward a stack of crates. "She's not the only one who's been kept in the dark. But you're right about one thing. She's important. She knows things." Jake took a step forward, his patience thinning. "What kind of things?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with urgency. The man's smile faded, and for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of something like fear in his eyes. "Things about the organization. About the people pulling the strings." Jake's mind raced as he absorbed the words. He had been right. Lily wasn't just a victim. She was a key to something bigger. But what? What had her father known? What secrets were hidden in the shadows of this place? The man took a deep breath and stepped back. "You think you're ready for the truth? That you're prepared for what comes next?" he asked, his voice colder now. "You're standing at the edge of something that goes deeper than you can understand. And once you know, there's no turning back." Jake didn't hesitate. He wasn't going to back down now. "I'm already in this," he said, his voice unwavering. "So tell me, where is she?" The man studied him for a moment, as if weighing the decision. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "She's in the basement," he said. "But it's not just her you need to worry about. There's more going on here than you realize. More people watching you. Watching her." Jake didn't waste another second. He moved toward the door, his mind set. He wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. Not when Lily's life was on the line. As he reached the staircase that led to the basement, the weight of what he was about to face pressed down on him. This wasn't just about finding Lily anymore. This was about exposing a hidden world, one that had been pulling the strings for too long. And Jake was about to tear it all down. Jake's heart hammered in his chest as he descended the creaky wooden staircase leading into the basement. The air grew colder with each step, the damp scent of mold and dust filling his nostrils. The faint light from his flashlight danced across the concrete walls, revealing nothing but shadows. He could hear the sound of his own breathing, heavy in the silence, as he reached the bottom. The basement was larger than he expected, stretching out before him like a forgotten underground world. The walls were lined with shelves stacked high with old crates, boxes, and papers, things that had been untouched for years. But Jake wasn't here for the old junk. His mind was focused on one thing only: finding Lily. As he moved deeper into the basement, he could see faint flickers of light through a small crack in the far wall. His pulse quickened. That was where she had to be. The deeper he went, the more he could feel the weight of the secret he was about to uncover pressing down on him. Every step felt like a step closer to the truth, and yet, the closer he got, the more dangerous it became. He didn't know who was waiting for him on the other side of that wall, but he was ready. As Jake approached the small crack in the wall, he could see that it was actually a hidden door. It wasn't much, just a small panel of wood with a rusty handle, but it was enough to make his heart race. He reached out, his hand steady as he gripped the handle and turned. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room on the other side. And there she was, Lily. She was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest, looking as small and fragile as ever. Her eyes flickered up to meet his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight of her. She looked terrified, her face pale, but there was something else in her eyes, something like relief. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You found me." Jake rushed toward her, his heart in his throat. "Of course I did. I told you I would," he said, his voice tight with emotion. He knelt down beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" Lily didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him with a strange expression, as if trying to figure out how much she could trust him. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know who's after me, or why they want me here. But I remember what my dad used to say. He used to warn me about people like this." Jake's heart sank. Her father, William Thompson, he had known something. He had tried to protect her, but now, that protection had fallen away, leaving Lily vulnerable. "We're going to get you out of here," Jake said, his voice firm with determination. "You're not alone, Lily. Not anymore. We'll figure this out, I promise." But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than Lily knew. What had her father gotten involved in? What secrets had he left behind? Before Jake could ask any more questions, he heard a noise from behind him. A low, scraping sound that echoed through the basement. He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, just the two of them, except for the faint noise, getting louder. It was the sound of footsteps. Heavy footsteps, moving toward them. Jake's heart raced. He turned to Lily, his voice urgent. "We need to move. Now." But Lily didn't move. She stayed frozen in place, her eyes wide with fear. Jake looked back at her, his brow furrowed. "Lily, we don't have time. We need to go now." But she just shook her head. "I can't. I don't know who they are, but they'll find me. They always do." Jake's eyes softened as he crouched down in front of her. "Listen to me, Lily. I'm not going to let them take you. You're not alone in this. We'll get you out of here. Together." Lily looked at him for a long moment, her face a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll trust you." Jake stood up, helping her to her feet, his eyes scanning the dark room for any sign of movement. The footsteps were getting closer. He didn't have much time. Without another word, Jake grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. But as they reached the doorway, they were stopped. The door slammed shut with a loud bang, trapping them inside. Jake spun around, his heart pounding as he turned back to Lily. "It's okay," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're going to find another way out." But the moment the words left his mouth, a voice echoed through the basement, cold and menacing. "You shouldn't have come here, Jake." Jake's blood ran cold as he recognized the voice. It was the man from the warehouse, the one who had been pulling the strings all along. The man who had orchestrated this entire nightmare. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine?" the voice continued. "You have no idea what you're up against." Jake's grip on Lily's hand tightened. He wasn't backing down now. "We're leaving, and you're not going to stop us." The voice laughed, a low, mocking sound that echoed through the basement. "You think you have control here? You have no idea what's coming next. Jake's jaw clenched. He wasn't going to let this man scare him. Not now, not ever. He turned back to Lily, his voice steady. Stay close. We're getting out of here, no matter what it takes. But the man's voice continued to echo, growing louder, colder. You can't escape what's coming, Jake. You never will. Jake stood frozen, his heart hammering as the cold voice echoed through the basement. He wasn't sure who the man was, but the hatred and malice in his words made it clear. This was the endgame. The room was dim, the air thick with tension, but Jake's resolve was unwavering. He wasn't going to let this man win. Not now. Not after everything he had fought for. His eyes flicked to Lily, who was clutching his hand tightly, her face pale with fear, but filled with trust. He had to protect her. We're getting out of here, Jake said through gritted teeth, trying to keep his voice steady despite the pressure building around him. And you're not going to stop us. The man's laughter continued, cold and mocking, reverberating around them. You think you can just walk away from this? You're already in too deep. There's no escape from what you've started. Jake's grip tightened on Lily's hand as they stood in the dark, facing the unknown. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to act. The voice was growing closer, but they couldn't stay here. Not now. The walls seemed to close in on them, but Jake knew they had to move. He turned to Lily, his expression fierce. Stay close. Don't let go, he said. Without waiting for her response, he started toward the far side of the basement, where he had seen a narrow exit leading to the back alley. He had no idea if it would lead them to safety, but it was their only option. His footsteps were silent on the cold concrete floor, his flashlight casting sharp shadows as he moved. The man's voice came again, louder now, filling the space with menace. You can't run from this. You never will. The words were like daggers in Jake's chest, but he didn't falter. He couldn't. Shut up, Jake muttered under his breath as he pulled Lily along with him. They reached the small door, and Jake pushed against it. It didn't budge. He tried again, this time using his shoulder to force it open. The door creaked and groaned, the rusted hinges protesting, but it gave way. They were outside. The cool night air hit them like a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. The alley was just as desolate as the rest of the area, shadows looming over them from every side. Jake quickly scanned the surroundings, his mind racing. This way, he said, pulling Lily into the alley, away from the danger of the warehouse. But just as they were about to round the corner, the sound of a car engine roared to life. Jake turned sharply, his instincts kicking in. A black sedan skidded around the corner, its headlights blinding them for a moment. The car screeched to a halt just a few feet away, blocking their path. Jake's heart skipped a beat. There was no way out. The door to the sedan opened, and two men stepped out, their faces masked in darkness. One of them was holding something. Jake's blood ran cold when he saw it. A gun. We've got nowhere else to go, Jake muttered under his breath, his eyes darting between the two men and the direction they had just come from. Lily's grip tightened on his hand, her eyes wide with fear. What do we do? She whispered. Jake swallowed hard, keeping his voice as calm as he could. We fight. Stay close. The two men advanced, slowly closing the distance between them. The gun was still aimed at Jake, its muzzle gleaming in the pale moonlight. The men were calm, their steps deliberate. It was clear they had done this before. But Jake wasn't about to let them take him, or Lily. He pulled her behind him, positioning himself as a shield. His mind was racing. There had to be something, some way out. Then it hit him. The warehouse. It had to be close. He just needed a distraction. Hey, Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the silence. The men hesitated for a moment, confused. That was all Jake needed. He bolted to the side, pulling Lily with him, ducking behind a large dumpster. The gunfire followed them. A sharp crack echoed through the alley as one of the men fired. Jake's heart leapt into his throat as he pulled Lily down further, his body instinctively shielding hers. Get down, Jake hissed, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. They were trapped in this alley, and the only way out was through. The gunshots rang out again, and Jake instinctively returned fire, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't think. He couldn't afford to think. It was just survival now. Lily, stay low, Jake ordered as he crouched beside her. Keep moving. When I say go, we run. Lily nodded, her face pale but determined. They were running out of time. Jake could feel the weight of the gunfire pushing them further back into the alley, but he couldn't stop. Not now. He counted silently in his head, waiting for the moment when they could make a break for it. Now, Jake shouted. He grabbed Lily's hand and yanked her forward, sprinting down the alley with everything he had. They were almost there, almost out of the line of fire when another car screeched to a halt at the entrance of the alley. The doors flung open. More men. More weapons. Jake pushed Lily behind him, ready to fight for her, ready to fight for their lives. But just as the men moved in, a loud screech echoed through the alley, the sound of tires spinning on the asphalt. A black motorcycle roared into view, barreling down the street, and within seconds, it was upon them. Jake barely had time to react as the rider swerved and pulled up next to him, a helmeted figure reaching out. "Get on," the rider shouted, voice muffled through the helmet. Jake hesitated for a second, but there was no time to think. He grabbed Lily and pulled her onto the motorcycle behind him. The rider didn't waste a second, gunning the engine and speeding off into the night. The gunfire faded behind them as they tore down the dark streets. Jake's heart still racing, but the danger still felt far too close. They weren't safe yet. They would never be safe. But, for the first time in what felt like forever, Jake had hope, and he would do whatever it took to make sure Lily made it out of this alive. In this thrilling chapter of Hell Angel stories, Jake is thrown into a dangerous world when he discovers the truth behind a missing girl's father and the web of violence surrounding him. As Jake delves deeper into the mystery, he encounters ruthless enemies who will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. With the girl, Lily, in his care, Jake races against time to unravel the tangled past of her father, William Thompson, and the powerful figures pulling the strings behind the scenes. Along the way, Jake faces countless obstacles, from gunfights to betrayals, all while protecting Lily from the shadowy figures that hunt her. As the story unfolds, Jake learns that the stakes are higher than he ever imagined. In these Hell Angel stories, survival isn't guaranteed, and every decision can mean the difference between life and death. The twists and turns keep coming, but Jake's determination to keep Lily safe pushes him forward, even when the odds seem impossible. This captivating journey into the dangerous world of the Hell Angels brings action, suspense, and heart-pounding moments as Jake takes on those who would harm the ones he loves. Dive into this incredible story filled with danger, secrets, and a relentless fight for survival in the world of Hell Angel stories.